On a crisp October morning in 2025, two hikers stumbled upon something that would reopen one of America's most haunting cold cases. Buried beneath 15 years of fallen leaves and forest debris, a weathered metal box contained secrets that would shatter everything investigators thought they knew about the disappearance of Troop 447. Before we dive into this mystery, please like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you think happened. Your opinion could be the key to understanding this story. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend. Back in October 2010, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of pine needles and wood smoke through the dense forests of Pine Ridge National Park in northern Colorado. 12-year-old Marcus Thompson adjusted his heavy backpack one more time, his excitement barely contained, as he watched his breath form small clouds in the cold morning air. The sound of zippers closing, boots crunching on dry leaves, and nervous laughter filled the parking lot where Troop 447 was preparing for what should have been a routine camping trip. Scoutmaster David Chen had led dozens of these expeditions before. His methodical approach and calm demeanor had earned the trust of every parent in their small mountain community of Millfield. That Friday morning, he checked and double-checked his roster. 8 boys, ages 12 to 14, all experienced campers. The familiar ritual of roll call echoed through the crisp air. Marcus Thompson, here. Jake Morrison, here. Tyler Walsh, here. Until all 8 voices had responded with the enthusiasm only young adventurers could muster. Sarah Thompson watched from her car as her son Marcus waved goodbye, his gap-toothed smile gleaming in the early morning sun. She could still hear the excitement in his voice from the night before. "Mom, we're gonna learn advanced knot tying, and Mr. Chen said if we're really good, he might teach us wilderness survival." The memory of his enthusiasm would haunt her for the next 15 years. The plan was simple: a 2-day camping trip at Devil's Canyon, a well-known spot just 12 miles into the forest. The boys would practice outdoor skills, earn merit badges, and return Sunday evening with stories and muddy boots. Cell service was spotty in the area, but Chen carried a satellite phone for emergencies. Everything seemed perfectly normal as the yellow school bus disappeared around the mountain curve, carrying 9 lives toward an encounter that would mystify investigators and devastate a community. But this weekend would mark the beginning of America's most perplexing missing persons case. By Sunday night, when the bus failed to return, search teams discovered something defying all logic: an abandoned campsite with signs of hasty departure, but no trace of 9 people. For 15 years, the case remained cold, until October 2025, when 2 hikers made a discovery that changed everything. What they found didn't just provide answers, it revealed a conspiracy so terrifying it would shake their small mountain town. What really happened to Troop 447? And why had someone gone to such lengths to hide the truth? Sunday evening, October 17th, 2010. The parking lot of Pine Ridge Elementary should have been filled with the familiar chaos of tired scouts reuniting with anxious parents. Instead, an eerie silence hung in the air as families clutched thermos, bottles of coffee, and checked their phones repeatedly. The yellow school bus was 3 hours overdue. Sarah Thompson paced near her Honda Civic, her wedding ring clicking against her coffee cup with each nervous tap. Other parents gathered in small clusters, their conversations growing quieter as the minutes stretched into hours. The autumn wind carried the scent of approaching rain, and the temperature was dropping fast. At 9:47 p.m., Sheriff Raymond Costa's radio crackled to life in his patrol car. The voice on the other end belonged to Deputy Martinez, stationed at the park entrance. "Sheriff, we've got a problem. Bus is here, but it's empty. Keys still in the ignition." The discovery sent shockwaves. Through the search team, located at the Devil's Canyon trailhead, the bus sat perfectly positioned, as if Chen had parked it normally. No signs of struggle, no broken windows, no blood. The doors were closed, but unlocked. Inside, 9 backpacks remained neatly arranged. In the seats, but personal items were missing. Wallets, phones, and the boys' favorite trinkets they never traveled without. Costa's flashlight beam swept across the campsite 200 yards from the bus. The scene was even more puzzling. 8 small tents were erected in perfect formation around a cold fire pit. Sleeping bags lay unrolled inside each tent, but something felt wrong. The campfire contained fresh ashes, suggesting it had been extinguished. Recently, yet, the surrounding area showed signs of hasty departure. Deputy Rodriguez discovered the first real clue near the tree line, a partial footprint in the soft earth, larger than any of the boys would have made. The print was deep, suggesting someone carrying extra weight, and it pointed away from the U campsite toward the dense forest beyond. As dawn broke over Pine Ridge, the full scale of the search operation became apparent. 50 volunteers, 3 tracking dogs, and a helicopter circled the area in expanding grids. The dogs picked up scents leading from the campsite, but lost the trail at a rocky outcropping half a mile into the forest, as if the group had simply vanished into thin air. By noon, FBI agent Rebecca Stone arrived from Denver. Her reputation for solving complex missing persons cases preceded her, but even she seemed baffled by the evidence. 9 people don't simply disappear without leaving substantial traces, especially not a group including 8 young boys who would likely panic in a crisis. The investigation revealed troubling inconsistencies. Chen's satellite phone was found in his tent, fully charged but never used to call for help. His detailed camping journal, which he religiously maintained on every trip, ended abruptly mid-sentence on Friday night. The final entry read, "Boys settling in well. Strange lights." Visible to the... What had Chen seen that night? And why had an experienced scoutmaster abandoned his post, leaving behind everything that could identify their location or call for rescue? The questions multiplied faster than answers, and the forest kept its secrets buried deep in the shadows. The third day of searching brought unsettling revelations that would haunt investigators for years. Agent Stone crouched beside the abandoned campfire, her trained eyes scanning details others had missed. The ash pattern was wrong, too uniform, too deliberately scattered. Someone had taken time to extinguish this fire properly. Not the frantic dousing one would expect in an emergency. Park Ranger Miguel Santos, who had worked these mountains for 23 years, noticed something that made his stomach turn. The wildlife was too quiet. Normally, this section of forest buzzed with activity. Squirrels chattering, birds calling, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Now, an unnatural silence pressed against the search teams like a heavy blanket. "In all my years out here, I've never seen the forest this still," Santos murmured to Stone as they examined the mysterious footprint. "It's like something spooked every living thing for miles." The helicopter pilot reported another anomaly from his aerial view. The vegetation in a circular area approximately 50 yards from the campsite appeared different, slightly yellowed, as if exposed to intense heat or chemicals. Ground teams investigating the area found the grass brittle beneath their boots, crumbling at the slightest touch. On Wednesday morning, searcher volunteers made a discovery that shifted the entire investigation. Tommy Breslin, a local hardware store owner, called out from a ravine 800 yards east of the campsite. Half buried under fallen branches, he had found a torn piece of fabric, red and blue, matching the description of Marcus Thompson's favorite flannel shirt. But the fabric told a disturbing story. The tear wasn't caused by thorns or rocks. The edges were too clean, too precise. Something sharp had cut through the material deliberately. More troubling still, the fabric showed no signs of weather damage despite being exposed to the elements for 4 days. Stone bagged the evidence personally, her mind racing with implications. The positioning seemed intentional, almost staged. Why would someone place a single piece of fabric in such a remote location? Was it a genuine clue or a calculated misdirection? Local geological surveys revealed another puzzle. The area surrounding Devil's Canyon sat atop an extensive limestone cave system, most of it unexplored and unmapped. The caves extended deep into the mountain, creating a labyrinth of tunnels that could potentially hide evidence or people for years. By Thursday, search dogs began exhibiting strange behavior. Rex, a German shepherd with 6 years of search and rescue experience, refused to enter certain areas of the forest. His handler, Officer Patricia Wells, had never seen such extreme reluctance from the normally fearless animal. "He's not scared," Wells observed, watching Rex whimper and back away from a seemingly normal grove of aspen trees. "He's confused, like the sense he's following just stop existing." The cave exploration team descended into the limestone tunnels, armed with specialized equipment and emergency oxygen supplies. What they found in the darkness would add yet another layer of mystery to an already incomprehensible case. Fresh scratches on the cave walls, too high to be made by animals. And deep in the tunnels, where no natural light had ever penetrated, they discovered something that shouldn't exist. Boot prints in the soft clay floor, leading deeper into the mountain's heart. Someone had been down there recently. But who and why? The cave system beneath Devil's Canyon stretched deeper than anyone had imagined. Spelunker Jake Morrison, no relation to the missing scout, led the underground search team through passages that seemed to defy the mountain's known geography. His headlamp cut through absolute darkness, revealing limestone formations that had existed undisturbed for millennia. 20 feet below ground, the air temperature dropped to a constant 48 degrees. Morrison's breath created small clouds as he navigated narrow passages that opened into cathedral-sized chambers. The silence was profound. Not the forest's unnatural quiet, but the complete absence of sound that exists only in the deepest places of the earth. The boot prints they followed were size 10, consistent with an adult male. More disturbing was their clarity in the soft cave floor. These weren't old marks worn down by time and moisture. Someone had walked these tunnels within the past week, possibly within days of the scout's disappearance. Agent Stone descended into the caves personally, her FBI training overriding any fear of enclosed spaces. The beam of her high-powered flashlight revealed scratches carved into the limestone walls, not random marks, but deliberate symbols that appeared to follow a pattern. Someone had taken considerable time and effort to carve these markings deep into the rock. "These aren't natural formations," Stone observed, running her fingers along the grooves. "Someone made these with metal tools. Recently." The cave system branched in multiple directions, creating a maze that could easily disorient anyone unfamiliar with its layout. But the person who left the boot prints had moved with confidence, following a specific route that suggested intimate knowledge of the underground passages. In the deepest accessible chamber, Morrison made a discovery that sent chills through the entire search team. A small pile of debris sat in the far corner. Candy wrappers, a broken compass, and most shocking of all, a merit badge partially buried under loose stones. The badge belonged to Tyler Walsh, one of the missing scouts. But how had Tyler's merit badge ended up in a cave chamber that required expert spelunking skills to reach? The descent involved rappelling down a 30-foot shaft and crawling through passages barely wide enough for an adult. No 12-year-old boy could have navigated this route alone. especially not in panic or distress. Stone photographed the evidence methodically, her mind working through the implications. Either someone had carried the boys' belongings into the caves, or Tyler had been brought here by someone else, someone who knew these tunnels intimately. The Geological Survey team provided even more puzzling information. Ground penetrating. Radar revealed additional passages extending far beyond the known cave system. Some readings suggested chambers large enough to house vehicles or substantial equipment, but accessing these deeper areas would require specialized mining equipment and weeks of careful excavation. Local historian Margaret Chen, no relation to the missing scoutmaster, provided crucial context. The limestone caves had been used by Native American tribes for centuries before European settlement. Later, during the late 1800s, mining operations had extended some natural passages, creating access tunnels that were abandoned when the silver veins played out. "There are old maps," Chen explained to Stone over coffee in Millfield's only diner, "from the mining days. Tunnels that were sealed decades ago, supposedly for safety reasons. But if someone knew how to access them..." The historian's research revealed something that made Stone's blood run cold. 3 other disappearances had occurred in the area over the past 30 years, all involving small groups, all with minimal evidence left behind. The cases had been investigated separately, with no connections drawn between them. Was someone using the cave system as a base of operations? And if so, what was their ultimate purpose? The deeper the investigation went, both literally and figuratively, the more questions arose. But one thing was becoming clear. This wasn't a simple missing persons case. Someone with intimate knowledge of the area had been planning this for a very long time. Agent Stone's investigation into the historical disappearances revealed a pattern that chilled her to the bone. Each incident occurred roughly 8 to 10 years apart, always in autumn, always involving groups of 3 to 9 people. The first documented case dated back to 1983, a family of 4 on a hiking expedition who vanished without a trace from the same general area. The Millfield Public Library's archives, dusty from decades of neglect, contained newspaper clippings that painted a disturbing picture. October 1983. The Harrison family disappeared during a weekend camping trip. October 1991. 5 college students from Boulder University never returned from a geological survey expedition. October 2002. 3 experienced hunters vanished during what should have been a routine deer hunting trip. Each case had been investigated thoroughly at the time. Search and rescue operations followed the same pattern. Abandoned campsites with minimal evidence, searches that yielded few clues, investigations that eventually went cold. The local authorities had never connected these incidents because they were separated by years and handled by different personnel. Stone spread the case files across her hotel room floor, creating a timeline that revealed the methodical nature of these disappearances. The intervals weren't random. Someone was operating on a schedule, waiting just long enough for attention to fade before striking again. The missing scoutmaster, David Chen, had lived in Millfield his entire life. His personnel file revealed something interesting. He had been a junior counselor at a local summer camp in 1991, the same year the college students disappeared. Was this connection mere coincidence, or had Chen been selected specifically for his knowledge of the area? Background checks on Chen revealed an exemplary record of community service and child protection. No criminal history, no suspicious financial activity, no red flags that would suggest involvement in the disappearances. Yet his intimate knowledge of Pine Ridge's trail system made him invaluable to anyone planning to move groups of people through the wilderness undetected. The Geological Survey from the missing college students had been studying the exact cave system where Tyler Walsh's merit badge was found. Their research notes, preserved in the university archives, contained detailed maps of underground passages, maps that were far more complete than any modern survey had produced. Dr. Elizabeth Murphy, the geology professor who had supervised the 1991 expedition, agreed to meet with Stone at the university campus. Now, in her 70s, Murphy's memory of that autumn remained painfully clear. "They were my best students," Murphy recalled, her hands trembling slightly as she handled the old survey maps. Experienced cavers, all of them. They weren't reckless. Kids, they were serious researchers. For them to simply vanish like that. She shook her head. "I always believed someone else was down there with them." The maps the students had created showed passages extending far beyond what current surveys indicated. Detailed notations marked unusual formations, water sources, and what appeared to be artificial modifications to natural chambers. Most intriguingly, several areas were marked with the notation "recent activity, non-geological." Stone studied these markings with growing concern. The college students had discovered evidence of human presence in the caves weeks before their disappearance. Their research notes mentioned constructed barriers, modified ventilation shafts, and stored materials in the deepest accessible chambers. Had the students stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see? And had their knowledge made them targets for whoever was using the cave system? The pattern was becoming clearer, but the motive remained obscure. Someone had been using Pine Ridge's remote location and extensive cave network for 3 decades, systematically eliminating anyone who discovered their operation. But what were they hiding that required such extreme measures? Stone requested complete geological surveys of the area, knowing that technology had advanced significantly since the 1990s. What they might find hidden beneath the mountain could finally provide answers if anyone was brave enough to venture that deep into the darkness. But time was running out. If the pattern held true, the person responsible was already planning their next move. 3 weeks into the investigation, FBI cyber specialist agent Maria Santos arrived in Millfield with equipment that transformed the local sheriff's office into a high-tech command center. Her assignment was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Trace any digital evidence that might reveal what happened to Troop 447. The boys' cell phones, recovered from their backpacks in the abandoned bus, told a story of normal teenage communication right up until Friday evening. Text messages to friends about the camping trip, social media posts showing their excitement, and the typical digital chatter of young people preparing for an adventure. Then, at 7:23 p.m. on Friday, all communication ceased simultaneously. Marcus U. Thompson's phone revealed the most intriguing evidence. His final text message, sent to his girlfriend Emma Rodriguez, read, "Something weird is happening. Mr. Chen is acting really strange and—" The message was never completed, as if Marcus had been interrupted mid-sentence. Santos recovered deleted messages from several devices, fragments of communication that painted a picture of growing unease among the scouts. Jake Morrison had texted his older brother, "This place feels wrong somehow." Tyler Walsh had tried to send a photo to his parents, but the image file was corrupted, showing only static and unclear shapes. The most significant discovery came from Chen's smartphone. His internet browsing history revealed extensive research into the cave systems beneath Pine Ridge, conducted in the weeks leading up to the camping trip. He had visited websites about spelunking techniques, downloaded topographical maps of the area, and, most troubling of all, had been corresponding with someone through an encrypted messaging app. Santos worked for hours to decrypt the messages, finally breaking through the security protocols to reveal a series of communications that turned the investigation upside down. Chen hadn't been a victim. He had been a participant. The encrypted conversations showed Chen discussing delivery, schedules, secure transport routes, and final arrangements. His contact identified only as Mountain, had provided specific instructions about timing and location. The final message in the chain, sent just hours before the camping trip, contained GPS coordinates that matched the exact location where the bus was found. But the most chilling discovery was a message from Chen dated 3 days before the trip. "The boys trust me completely. This will be easier than we thought." Santos felt her stomach drop as the implications became clear. David Chen, the trusted scoutmaster who had earned the love and respect of the entire community, had deliberately led 8 children into danger. But why? And who was Mountain? The investigation into Chen's background intensified. Financial records revealed irregular deposits into his bank account over the past 2 years. Small amounts that wouldn't trigger automatic scrutiny, but totaling nearly $50,000. The money came from an offshore account registered to a shell corporation that Santos's team was still working to trace. Chen's computer hard drive, examined using advanced forensic recovery techniques, revealed deleted files that provided more pieces of the puzzle. Floor plans of what appeared to be underground facilities, supply lists that included medical equipment and food provisions for extended stays, and most disturbing of all, psychological profiles of each of the 8 missing boys. Someone had been planning this operation for months, possibly years. They had studied the children, identified the perfect opportunity, and recruited Chen as their inside accomplice. But the scope of the preparation suggested resources and organization far beyond what a single individual could manage. The encrypted communications revealed references to the facility, Phase 3 operations, and specimen transport protocols. The language was clinical, detached, the terminology of people who viewed the missing children not as human beings, but as commodities. Santos presented her findings to Agent Stone with a heavy heart. The case had evolved from a missing persons investigation into something far more sinister. Somewhere beneath the Colorado mountains, 8 children and their betrayer were being held for purposes that neither agent wanted to contemplate. But now they had digital breadcrumbs to follow. The question was whether they could trace them back to their source before it was too late. Advanced ground-penetrating radar revealed what the investigators had feared most: an extensive underground complex hidden deep within the mountain. The facility was far more sophisticated than natural caves or abandoned mining tunnels. This was purposefully constructed, with reinforced concrete walls, ventilation systems, and what appeared to be multiple levels extending down into the bedrock. The radar imaging showed a main entry point approximately 2 miles from the original campsite, concealed beneath what appeared to be a natural rock formation. Heat sensors detected minimal thermal signatures, suggesting the facility was either unoccupied or heavily insulated. But the power consumption readings told a different story. Someone was drawing significant electricity from the regional grid through a series of buried cables. Agent Stone assembled a tactical team comprising FBI specialists, local SWAT personnel, and cave rescue experts. The entry operation would be dangerous under the best circumstances, but the unknown variables made it potentially deadly. They had no idea how many people might be inside, what security measures existed, or what condition the hostages might be in after 3 weeks of captivity. The concealed entrance required specialized equipment to access. What looked like solid rock was actually an ingeniously designed door system, camouflaged to blend seamlessly with the natural stone face. Hidden hydraulic mechanisms required electronic activation. Someone had invested serious money and engineering expertise in this installation. Inside, the facility defied all expectations. Instead of crude tunnels or makeshift chambers, the Itawir team encountered a sophisticated complex with poured concrete floors, fluorescent lighting, and climate control systems. The construction quality suggested professional contractors working from detailed blueprints, not amateur excavation. The first level contained what appeared to be administrative offices, complete with computer workstations, filing cabinets, and communication equipment. But the files and hard drives had been recently destroyed. Someone had systematically wiped every trace of digital evidence before abandoning the facility. Deeper levels revealed the true purpose of the installation. Medical examination rooms equipped with restraint systems, holding cells designed for multiple occupants, and most chilling of all, what appeared to be a laboratory setup with equipment designed for biological sample collection and analysis. On the third level down, the team found evidence of recent occupancy. Food wrappers bearing dates from the past month, blankets still warm to the touch, and personal items that belonged to the missing scouts. Marcus Thompson's digital watch, Jake Morrison's compass, articles of clothing that parents would later identify through tearful testimony. But the children were gone. The facility had been abandoned hastily, probably within the past few days. Whoever operated this place had learned about the investigation and evacuated before law enforcement could arrive. The deepest accessible level contained the most disturbing discoveries. Medical records filed under code numbers rather than names, detailed documentation of physical examinations, and research notes that suggested the children had been subjected to experimental procedures of an unspecified nature. Agent Stone found herself staring at photographs pinned to a bulletin board. Surveillance images of all 8 missing boys taken over a period of months. Someone had been watching these children, studying their routines, documenting their activities, long before the camping trip. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated abduction. The scope of the operation was staggering. Construction of the facility would have required heavy equipment, multiple contractors, and significant financial investment. The medical equipment alone represented hundreds of thousands of dollars. This wasn't the work of a lone predator. It was an organized enterprise with substantial resources and long-term planning. But most troubling of all was what the facility suggested about the wider operation. The holding cells were designed for far more than 8 children. The medical equipment could process dozens of subjects simultaneously. Whatever was happening here, the missing scouts were just one group in a much larger program. The team discovered ventilation shafts leading deeper into the mountain, suggesting additional levels that would require specialized equipment to access. Emergency lighting systems indicated backup power supplies and redundant safety measures. Someone had designed this facility to operate independently for extended periods. As the tactical team completed their sweep, one question dominated everyone's thoughts. If this facility was just one installation, how many others existed? And where had they taken the children when they evacuated this site? The investigation had revealed a conspiracy far more extensive and terrifying than anyone had imagined. But the missing scouts were still out there somewhere, and time was running out to find them. The medical records recovered from the facility revealed a horror beyond imagination. Code-named subjects, experimental protocols, and detailed documentation of procedures that violated every ethical standard of modern medicine. The children weren't just kidnapped. They were being used as test subjects in illegal human experimentation. FBI forensic accountants traced the Shell Corporation funding to a network of offshore accounts spanning multiple countries. The money trail led through pharmaceutical companies, private research foundations, and ultimately to a consortium of wealthy individuals who had been funding illegal medical research for over 2 decades. Agent Stone stood in the FBI field office in Denver, surrounded by evidence boards that looked like something from a conspiracy thriller. Red string-connected photographs, documents, and maps showing a network that extended far beyond Pine Ridge. Similar facilities had been identified in Montana, Wyoming, and Northern California, all using the same construction methods, all hidden in remote wilderness areas. The scope of the operation was staggering. Internal documents recovered from the facility revealed that they called themselves the Prometheus Group, referring to their work as advancing human potential through controlled experimentation. The clinical language couldn't disguise the reality. They were torturing children in the name of science. Dr. James Morrison, a geneticist who had disappeared from Stanford University in 2008, appeared in multiple photographs found at the facility. His research had focused on genetic modification and cellular regeneration, cutting-edge science that required live human subjects to advance beyond theoretical models. Morrison had been fired from Stanford for ethical violations, but clearly, his research had continued in secret. The connection to Scoutmaster David Chen became clearer as investigators dug deeper into his background. His sister had died of a rare genetic disorder when she was 12 years old, the same age as the Scouts he had betrayed. Financial records showed that Chen's mother had received experimental treatment at a clinic connected to the Prometheus group, treatment that had failed to save her daughter's life. Someone in the organization had approached Chen with promises of revenge against the medical establishment that had failed his family, combined with financial incentives that he desperately needed. His betrayal wasn't random greed, it was motivated by a toxic combination of grief, anger, and manipulation by experts who knew exactly how to exploit his vulnerabilities. The facility's computer servers, partially destroyed but not completely wiped, revealed communication logs between multiple sites, references to specimen transfers, research coordination, and security protocols painted a picture of a highly organized operation with military-level planning and execution. Most chilling were the references to graduation ceremonies, events where successful experimental subjects were supposedly released back to their families with cover stories to explain their absences. But forensic analysis of the communication patterns suggested that very few subjects ever reached these supposed graduations. The investigation revealed that the Prometheus group had been operating for over 30 years, perfecting their methods through trial and error. Early operations had been crude and often unsuccessful, but they had learned from their mistakes. The Pine Ridge facility represented the current state of their evolution: sophisticated, nearly undetectable, and horrifyingly efficient. Agent 2020 Santos discovered that the group had been monitoring law enforcement communications throughout the investigation. They had known about every search operation, every discovery, every breakthrough the FBI had made. Someone inside law enforcement had been feeding them information, allowing them to stay one step ahead of the investigation. The betrayal went deeper than anyone had suspected. Trust, the foundation of any investigation, had been compromised from the very beginning. But now Stone knew what they were dealing with: a well-funded, highly organized criminal enterprise with connections reaching into the highest levels of government and industry. The question was no longer just about finding 8 missing children. It was about exposing a conspiracy that had been destroying lives for decades, operating with impunity while hiding behind legitimate business facades and scientific credentials. But their very success might be their downfall. The Prometheus group had grown large enough to leave traces that couldn't be completely erased, and somewhere in those traces was the information Stone needed to find the missing Scouts before they became permanent subjects in someone's twisted vision of scientific progress. The hunt was no longer just about rescue, it was about justice for every victim who had disappeared into the darkness of the Prometheus group's facilities. The intercepted communications revealed that the Prometheus group was preparing to relocate their operations overseas. Encrypted messages referenced a final harvest and asset liquidation scheduled within the next 72 hours. Agent Stone realized with growing horror that the missing Scouts might be killed to eliminate evidence before the organization disappeared permanently. Satellite imagery analysts worked around the clock to identify potential relocation sites, The group's pattern of operation suggested they would move to another remote wilderness area, probably in a country with limited law enforcement cooperation. But moving 8 children and sophisticated medical equipment would require significant logistics, an opportunity for law enforcement to intercept them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tommy Walsh, Tyler's father, had been conducting his own investigation since his son's disappearance. A former military intelligence officer, Walsh had used his contacts to trace unusual equipment purchases in the region. His amateur detective work had uncovered purchase orders for specialized medical transport equipment delivered to a private airstrip 40 miles north of Pine Ridge. The airstrip was registered to another shell corporation linked to the Prometheus Group. Surveillance revealed unusual activity. Large vehicles arriving under cover of darkness, aircraft being prepped for extended flights, and, most importantly, signs that suggested imminent departure. Stone coordinated with federal aviation authorities to monitor all flight plans from the airstrip. Any aircraft attempting to leave would be grounded immediately, but they needed to move carefully to avoid triggering a hostage situation that could endanger the children's lives. The tactical approach required splitting their resources between multiple possible scenarios. The children might still be at the airstrip, they might be en route from another facility, or they might already be aboard aircraft preparing for immediate departure. Each possibility required different strategies and carried different risks. Dr. Sarah Chen, David Chen's estranged sister, and a pediatric trauma specialist, volunteered to assist with the rescue operation. Despite her brother's betrayal, she was determined to help save the children he had condemned. Her medical expertise would be crucial if the scouts had been subjected to experimental procedures that required immediate treatment. "Whatever they've done to those boys, we need to be prepared for anything," Dr. Chen told the assembled rescue team. "Based on the equipment we found at the facility, they could be dealing with anything from psychological trauma to serious physical modifications." Intelligence indicated that Dr. James Morrison was personally overseeing the final phase of the operation. His presence at the airstrip suggested that the experimental subjects, the missing scouts, were valuable enough to require his direct supervision during transport. The FBI's hostage rescue team positioned themselves around the airstrip perimeter. As dawn approached, thermal imaging revealed multiple heat signatures in the main hangar, but identifying which were targets and which were hostages proved impossible from their current positions. Radio intercepts revealed that the Prometheus Group was aware of increased law enforcement activity in the area. Their communications showed growing paranoia and discussions of contingency protocols that might include eliminating all evidence of their operations. At 6:23 a.m., a convoy of black SUVs approached the airstrip from the south. Surveillance confirmed that this was likely the transport containing the missing children. The vehicles moved with military precision, suggesting that the Prometheus Group employed professional security personnel rather than typical criminals. The moment of confrontation was approaching. Stone knew that the next few hours would determine whether 8 children would be rescued or lost forever. But the organization they were facing had resources, planning, and desperation that made them extremely dangerous opponents. As the SUVs entered the airstrip compound, Stone gave the signal to begin the operation. FBI agents moved into position, preparing for a confrontation that would either end the Prometheus Group's reign of terror or escalate it to levels no one wanted to imagine. The children's lives hung in the balance, and time was running out. The hangar erupted in chaos as FBI agents stormed through multiple entry points simultaneously. Flash-bang grenades illuminated the interior, revealing a scene that would haunt investigators for years to come. Medical equipment surrounded 8 gurneys, each occupied by one of the missing scouts, unconscious but breathing. Dr. James Morrison stood over Marcus Thompson with a syringe in his hand, his face showing no emotion as armed agents surrounded him. The clinical detachment in his eyes suggested someone who had lost all connection to human empathy, viewing the children as nothing more than research materials. "You're too late," Morrison said calmly, not dropping the syringe. "The final phase is already in progress. These subjects represent years of research that will revolutionize human medicine." Agent Stone kept her weapon trained on Morrison while emergency medical personnel rushed to assess the children's conditions. The boys appeared to be under heavy sedation, their vital signs stable but altered in ways that suggested pharmacological intervention beyond simple anesthesia. David Chen sat in a corner of the hangar, his hands zip-tied behind his back, and his face showing the hollow expression of someone whose world had collapsed completely. The man who had once been trusted with children's lives now looked broken, defeated by the magnitude of his betrayal. "I never meant for it to go this far," Chen whispered to Stone as she passed. "They said it was just research. They said the boys wouldn't be permanently harmed." The medical team's initial assessment revealed that all 8 children were alive, but had been subjected to experimental procedures of unknown duration and scope. 4 ports had been surgically implanted, suggesting ongoing treatment or monitoring. Blood work would be needed to determine what substances had been introduced into their systems. Dr. Sarah Chen worked frantically to stabilize her nephew and the other scouts, her medical training overriding the emotional trauma of seeing what her brother had enabled. Each child showed signs of recent medical intervention, surgical sites, monitoring devices, and chemical markers that suggested sophisticated experimental protocols. Morrison's arrest revealed the extent of the Prometheus Group's arrogance. His briefcase contained detailed documentation of the procedures performed on each child, research notes that treated human suffering as mere data points, and, most damning of all, video recordings of the experiments. The recordings would later become crucial evidence in prosecuting the entire network, but watching them required psychological preparation that few investigators possessed. The children had been conscious during many procedures, their fear and confusion documented with scientific precision by people who saw them as laboratory animals. As emergency vehicles rushed the unconscious scouts to Denver Children's Hospital, the full scope of the airstrip operation became clear. 3 aircraft had been prepared for immediate departure to research facilities in countries without extradition treaties. The Prometheus Group had been planning to disappear with their victims, continuing their work beyond the reach of American law enforcement. Additional arrests followed rapidly. The airstrip's ground crew, medical technicians, and security personnel were taken into custody. Many had been working for the organization for years, earning substantial salaries to maintain silence about activities they knew were illegal. But the most significant arrest was yet to come. Hidden in the airstrip's administrative office, agents found Eleanor Whitman, a former pharmaceutical executive who had been funding the Prometheus Group's operations through a complex network of shell companies. Her presence at the airstrip during the final evacuation revealed her direct involvement in the conspiracy. "You have no idea what you're interrupting," Whitman told Stone during her arrest. "This research will save millions of lives. A few sacrifices now prevent countless deaths in the future." The cold calculation in her voice revealed someone who had rationalized atrocities in the name of greater good, a mindset that allowed her to sleep peacefully while children suffered in underground laboratories. The medical equipment found at the airstrip told its own story of horror. Genetic sequencing machines, cellular modification chambers, and monitoring devices designed to track biological changes in living subjects over extended periods. The Prometheus Group hadn't just been experimenting on the children, they had been transforming them. As the sun rose over the airstrip, painting the Colorado mountains in golden light, Agent Stone felt the weight of everything they had discovered. 8 children had been rescued, but the investigation had revealed a network of evil that had been operating for decades. How many other victims had disappeared into the Prometheus Group's facilities over the years? The immediate crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning. Bringing down an organization this sophisticated would require international cooperation, forensic accounting expertise, and the courage of victims willing to testify about experiences that most people couldn't imagine. But for now, 8 families would be reunited with their children, and the nightmare that had begun in October 2010 was finally approaching its end. Denver Children's Hospital became the epicenter of a medical mystery that challenged everything doctors thought they knew about pediatric care. The 8 rescued scouts required treatment protocols that had never been attempted before, their bodies altered by experimental procedures that took weeks to fully understand. Dr. Sarah Chen led the medical team treating her nephew and the other boys, working tirelessly to reverse whatever modifications had been imposed on them. Blood tests revealed synthetic compounds that didn't match any known pharmaceutical databases, genetic markers that shouldn't exist in normal human physiology, and cellular changes that suggested systematic biological manipulation. Marcus Thompson was the first to regain consciousness, 3 days after the rescue. His parents sat by his bedside, tears streaming down their faces as their son opened his eyes for the first time in nearly a month. But the boy who looked back at them wasn't quite the same child who had left for the camping trip with such excitement. "I remember everything," Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse from weeks of intubation. "They made us watch each other. They said it was part of the research." The psychological trauma would prove as challenging to treat as the physical modifications. All 8 boys had been subjected to procedures while conscious, forced to witness each other's suffering as part of what Dr. Morrison called stress response analysis. The cruelty was methodical, designed to maximize both physical and psychological data collection. Jake Morrison, no relation to the lead researcher, suffered the most severe complications. His body rejected the synthetic compounds in his system, leading to organ failure that required emergency intervention. For days, doctors weren't sure he would survive the detoxification process. Tyler Walsh exhibited the strangest symptoms: enhanced sensory perception that left him overwhelmed by normal hospital sounds and lighting. The Prometheus Group had been experimenting with neurological enhancement, using the children as test subjects for procedures that might have military applications. The other scouts showed varying degrees of modification and trauma. Some had been subjected to genetic therapy attempts, others to pharmaceutical trials for drugs that had never passed FDA approval. Each case required individualized treatment. Plans developed in real time as doctors discovered the extent of what had been done. Agent Stone interviewed each child as their conditions improved, gathering evidence for the prosecutions that would follow. But the interviews were as much about healing as investigation, giving the boys a chance to tell their stories to someone who believed them and would ensure their suffering hadn't been in vain. The psychological evaluation revealed that David Chen had been present during many of the procedures, sometimes holding the boys' hands while Dr. Morrison worked. The betrayal of trust was complete. The man they had looked up to as a mentor had been complicit in their torture. "He kept telling us it would be over soon," Tyler recalled during one session, "that we were helping other kids by going through this. But his eyes, he knew it was wrong. He knew, and he let it happen anyway." The recovery process extended beyond the hospital. Families required counseling to process what their children had endured. The community of Millfield struggled to understand how someone they had trusted could have orchestrated such horrors. Sarah Thompson found herself unable to look at camping equipment, the sight triggering memories of that October morning when she had watched her son disappear into what she thought was a routine adventure. The family's healing would take years, if it ever came at all, But there were positive developments. The boys formed an unbreakable bond through their shared experience, supporting each other through recovery in ways that amazed their treatment team. Their resilience, even after everything they had endured, offered hope for their long-term psychological healing. Medical journals would eventually publish papers on the treatment protocols developed for the Scouts, advancing pediatric trauma care in ways that might help future victims of similar crimes. Good had emerged from evil, though at a cost that no child should ever have to pay. As winter settled over Colorado, 8 families began the long process of rebuilding their lives. The immediate danger was over, but the shadows cast by their experience would follow them for years to come. The federal courthouse in Denver became the stage for one of the most complex criminal prosecutions in American legal history. 18 defendants faced charges ranging from kidnapping and human trafficking to violations of international laws governing medical experimentation. The evidence filled 3 courtrooms and required expert witnesses from fields as diverse as genetics, psychology, and international finance. David Chen's trial began first, drawing national media attention and protesters from both sides. Some viewed him as a monster who had betrayed innocent children, while others saw him as a victim of manipulation by more sophisticated criminals. The truth, as revealed through testimony, was more complex than either narrative suggested. Chen's defense. Attorney painted a picture of a grief-stricken man whose desperation had been exploited by master manipulators. The death of his sister, his mother's failed treatment, and his mounting financial problems had created vulnerabilities that the Prometheus Group had identified and exploited with surgical precision. But the prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, Tyler's aunt, who had requested the assignment, demonstrated that Chen's choices had been deliberate and ongoing. Financial records showed he had received payments for recruiting suitable subjects, suggesting his involvement extended far beyond the single camping trip. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh said in her closing argument, "grief does not excuse the systematic torture of 8 innocent children. David Chen made choices, and those choices destroyed lives. The 8 Scouts, now teenagers still dealing with the physical and psychological aftermath of their ordeal, provided victim impact statements that brought the courtroom to tears. Marcus Thompson, speaking publicly for the first time since the rescue, described the moment he realized his trusted Scout master had betrayed them. "I kept thinking he would save us," Marcus testified, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Even when they were hurting us, I thought Mr. Chen would make it stop. It took me years to understand that he was the reason it was happening." Dr. James Morrison's trial revealed the full scope of the Prometheus Group's research program. Expert witnesses testified about genetic modification techniques that violated international treaties, pharmaceutical trials that ignored basic safety, protocols and psychological experiments designed to break down the subject's resistance to further procedures. Morrison showed no remorse throughout the proceedings, maintaining that his research would eventually benefit humanity despite the immediate suffering it caused. His clinical detachment, even when faced with videos of the children's torture, demonstrated a complete disconnection from human empathy. Eleanor Whitman's trial exposed the financial network that had funded decades of illegal research. Forensic accountants traced money flows through dozens of shell companies, revealing connections to legitimate pharmaceutical corporations that had knowingly purchased research data obtained through illegal means. The international implications were staggering. Companies in 6 countries had benefited from research conducted on unwilling human subjects, leading to diplomatic tensions and calls for new international oversight of medical research funding. But the most dramatic moment came when additional victims stepped forward. Adults who had survived earlier Prometheus Group operations testified about experiences dating back to the 1980s, revealing that the Pine Ridge facility was just one installation in a network that had operated across multiple states. Jennifer Harrison, now 42, had been taken with her family in 1983 when she was 8 years old. She was the only survivor of that incident, rescued after 3 months when the facility was abandoned following a security breach. Her testimony provided crucial evidence about the organization's methods and longevity. "They told us we were helping sick children by letting them study healthy ones," Harrison testified, "but there was nothing healthy about what they did to us." The trials lasted 18 months, resulting in convictions for all 18 defendants. Chen received 25 years without possibility of parole. Morrison and Whitman were sentenced to life in prison. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years, depending on their level of involvement. But even as justice was served in the courtroom, investigators knew that the Prometheus Group's network extended beyond those they had captured. Offshore accounts remained active. Research facilities in other countries continued operating, and somewhere, other children might still be suffering. The legal victory was significant, but incomplete. The fight against organized human experimentation would continue long after the headlines faded. October 2025. 15 years after the nightmare began, hikers Sarah Mitchell and Tom Rodriguez made the discovery that would finally close the loop on the Troop 447 case. The metal box they found buried beneath decades of forest debris contained evidence that prosecutors had been searching for since the trials ended, proof of how many other victims the Prometheus Group had claimed. The box had been carefully waterproofed and buried in a location that suggested it was meant to be found eventually. Inside, investigators discovered meticulously organized files documenting every person who had disappeared into the organization's network over 4 decades of operation. Agent Stone, now retired but consulted as an expert on the case, examined the contents with a mixture of vindication and horror. The files contained photographs, medical records, and detailed documentation of 847 individuals who had been subjected to illegal experimentation between 1978 and 2010. Each file told a story of lives interrupted, families destroyed, and suffering that extended far beyond anything revealed during the trials. Children, adults, entire families. The Prometheus Group had targeted anyone who met their research criteria and could be taken without triggering extensive investigations. The box also contained something else, a confession letter written by Dr. James Morrison during his final days of freedom, before the airstrip raid that ended his career. In it, he expressed no remorse for his actions, but provided detailed information about the scope of the organization's activities. "Future researchers will thank us for the data we collected," Morrison had written. "The advancement of human medical science requires sacrifice, and history will vindicate our methods, even if our contemporaries lack the vision to appreciate them." But the most significant discovery was a set of coordinates pointing to burial sites across the American West. The Prometheus Group had maintained detailed records of where they disposed of subjects who didn't survive their procedures, treating human remains with the same clinical detachment they had shown living victims. FBI forensic teams began the grim task of excavating the sites, recovering remains that would finally allow families to bury their loved ones and begin the healing process. Each recovery was a small victory against the organization's attempt to erase their victims from history. The box also revealed the existence of international partners who had continued the Prometheus Group's work after the American network was dismantled. Facilities in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and Central America were still operating, still taking victims, still conducting the same illegal research that had destroyed so many lives. Marcus Thompson, now 27 and working as a victim's rights advocate, stood with Agent Stone as they examined the contents of the box that had changed everything. The boy who had once texted his girlfriend about something weird happening at camp was now a man dedicated to ensuring no other children would suffer as he had. "They wanted to erase us," Marcus said, holding one of the files that contained his own childhood photograph. "They wanted us to disappear without a trace, to become nothing but data in their research. But they couldn't destroy what we became because of surviving them." The discovery triggered a new international investigation, with Interpol coordinating efforts to locate and shut down the remaining facilities. The Prometheus Group's arrogance in maintaining such detailed records had become their final downfall. Evidence that would be used to bring justice to victims who had been forgotten by time. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had devoted her career to treating victims of medical crimes after her nephew's rescue, led the team developing new protocols for identifying and helping survivors of illegal experimentation. The box's contents provided crucial information about the long-term effects of the procedures, advancing treatment options for current and future victims. As autumn returned to Pine Ridge, families of the missing finally had answers to questions that had haunted them for decades. Some learned that their loved ones had died quickly, sparing them prolonged suffering. Others discovered that people they had mourned were actually still alive, held in foreign facilities that could now be located and raided. The metal box, buried for 15 years beneath the Colorado wilderness, had accomplished what its creators never intended. Instead of hiding evidence of their crimes, it had provided the key to exposing the full scope of their network and bringing closure to hundreds of families who had never known what happened to their missing relatives. But as investigators worked through the files, one question remained. Who had buried the box, and why had they wanted it to be found? The answer came from an unexpected source. Eleanor Whitman, serving her life sentence in federal prison, requested a meeting with Agent Stone after learning about the discovered box. The woman who had funded decades of human suffering was finally ready to reveal the truth about her organization's final act. "I buried that box," Whitman confessed during their meeting in the prison's maximum security visiting room. "Not out of remorse. I still believe our research was necessary, but because I knew someone needed to finish what we started." Stone leaned forward, studying the woman who had orchestrated so much pain. Even after years in prison, Whitman maintained the clinical detachment that had allowed her to rationalize atrocities. But something in her expression suggested this confession carried deeper significance. Whitman explained that the box had been her insurance policy, buried in the final weeks before the airstrip raid when she realized their American operations were compromised. She had included detailed records not just of past victims, but of ongoing research projects that she hoped would continue her work. The coordinates weren't just burial sites, Whitman revealed. Some led to active facilities that we couldn't evacuate in time. I knew that someone would eventually find the box, and when they did, they would discover operations that law enforcement hadn't identified. The revelation transformed the investigation once again. Several of the coordinates pointed to locations where victims might still be held alive, trapped in facilities that had been abandoned but not destroyed. Emergency response teams mobilized across 3 countries, racing to reach sites that might still house living victims. In Romania, investigators found 12 survivors in a facility that had been sealed but maintained on automated life support for over a decade. The victims, now adults, had been held in induced comas while researchers continued experimental procedures remotely through computerized systems. A facility in Thailand yielded 8 more survivors, children who had been taken in the 1990s and subjected to longevity experiments that had artificially slowed their aging process. Now, technically in their 30s but appearing physically unchanged from their teenage years, they faced the challenge of adapting to a world that had moved on without them. The most significant discovery came in Kazakhstan, where investigators found not just survivors, but active researchers continuing the Prometheus Group's work under new management. 23 victims were rescued from ongoing experimentation, including 3 who had been taken within the past year. As the international operations concluded, the final tally was staggering. The buried box had led to the rescue of 47 additional survivors and the recovery of remains from over 200 victims who had died in captivity. The Prometheus Group's network had been even more extensive than anyone had imagined. Marcus Thompson stood once again in the Colorado mountains, where his nightmare had begun 15 years earlier. Now married with children of his own, he had dedicated his life to ensuring that the Prometheus Group's victims were remembered, and that similar organizations could never operate with such impunity. "They thought they could erase us from history," he said, addressing the families gathered for a memorial service at Pine Ridge. "But survivors don't stay buried. Truth doesn't stay hidden. And evil, no matter how carefully organized, eventually destroys itself." The memorial, erected near the site where the original campsite had been discovered, bore the names of all 847 documented victims. It served as both a tribute to those who had suffered and a warning to anyone who might consider following the Prometheus Group's path. Agent Stone, now in her 70s, attended the ceremony with mixed emotions. The case that had defined her career was finally closed, but the cost had been measured in hundreds of lives and countless families torn apart by unimaginable cruelty. As sunset painted the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and crimson, the memorial service concluded with a moment of silence for victims who would never see another sunset. But it also celebrated the survivors who had overcome unthinkable trauma to rebuild their lives and ensure that their suffering had meaning. The Prometheus Group was finished, their network dismantled, their leaders imprisoned or dead. But the legacy of their victims lived on, not in the clinical notes of illegal experiments, but in the strength of survivors who had refused to let evil have the final word. In the end, the box that changed everything had accomplished what its creator never intended. Instead of preserving the Prometheus Group's legacy, it had ensured their complete destruction while giving voice to every victim they had tried to silence. Some secrets are too dark to stay buried forever. And sometimes the truth is exactly what justice requires to finally, truly be served.